Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So the Treasury has generated quite a bit of interest by leaking their investigation into a long called for overhauling of council tax and basically the scrapping of stamp duty, at least on main residences. Now, all the Treasury is really doing at the moment is working on the feasibility. But if it comes back as viable, what would this mean politically, economically, and for people's personal finances? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So, Rachel Reeves has ordered a study into the impact of replacing stamp duty with a different form of tax, which is supposed to be progressive and, most importantly, doesn't risk blocking the movement of labour around the country, but also giving council tax a much needed update as well. Now, as people have pointed out for years, there are some people living in luxury flats or even mansions who pay less council tax than some others living in an ordinary semi-detached house, sometimes even just a terrace. But before going over what appear to be the options being considered, let's just begin with stamp duty. This is the big one, and why abolishing it would please everyone, left and right. Economists often say stamp duty is literally the worst tax there is, the most damaging to the economy at any rate. Our tax system is a bit of a mess. I think it's a consequence of the fact that our nation has existed for centuries and we've built and tweaked on a system set up hundreds of years ago. But tearing it all down and starting from scratch would be a mammoth undertaking, and no one really wants to do that. You'd need cross-party support apart from anything else, and given that tax is literally the single biggest point of contention between the left and the right, good luck trying to get any consensus on it. As a result of a tax system which resembles the tangles of a Christmas tree lights each year, many of our taxes don't actually serve a coherent economic purpose. Instead, most of them were just implemented or fiddled with to solve a quick political problem. But a tax system really needs to do three things, doesn't it? It needs to cycle money around the economy. It needs to encourage economically beneficial behaviours, or even just socially responsible behaviours. And it needs to discourage economically harmful or socially irresponsible behaviours. So, for example, you don't pay income tax on earnings that are put into a pension fund. You do pay high rates of tax on tobacco. But some taxes actually punish you for doing something good, and sometimes you have tax breaks which will encourage you to do something bad. And stamp duty is seen as one example. It's effectively a tax on moving house. But what if you need to move house to get a better job at the other end of the country? Often the stamp duty is so expensive that people turn those jobs down because they simply wouldn't be able to afford a house of equivalent quality in the other part of the country. And that deprives both the business and the worker of an opportunity which would be good for the UK economy, particularly when you talk about this happening for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. Stamp duty is seen as a tax on moving skilled workers around the country, basically. Everyone hates it. The right hate it because it's a tax on people with a bit of money. The left hate it because it's making it harder to move skills around the country. It's been calculated that even low levels of stamp duty would be a barrier to people moving for better work elsewhere. The implication, therefore, is if you get rid of it, or at least substantially reduce people's liabilities, that could be a genuine decent boost to growth. So Reeves thinking about getting rid of it is very big news, though the fact that everyone hates it, but it's still with us, could probably give you a hint that removing it is not politically straightforward. Because let's be clear, abolishing it doesn't mean getting rid of it and not replacing it with something else. So that something else, which has presented the political difficulties, in getting rid of stamp duty, is the thing, it's the nut you have to crack. So what are the Treasury looking at? Well, according to The Guardian, we're obviously not going to get fine details here because they've only just started this investigation. But The Guardian got the exclusive on this, and they're suggesting it would be a new property tax. So how would this be different? You pay stamp duty when you buy a property above a certain value. The value can be a bit higher if you're a first-time buyer. You get a bit of a higher boundary. The rates begin at like 5% and they move up to 12% in 3 brackets. Now, although we aren't going to have any details yet, the Treasury seem to be looking at a tax which is instead applied when you sell rather than buy your owner-occupied house. So first-time buyers would pay nothing. no matter the value of the home. I emphasise owner-occupied because the plan seems to be that stamp duty will still exist, but for other properties. You just won't pay stamp duty when you buy a house for your residence. The purpose of this potential change is just purely to stop people being discouraged from taking up better jobs because of this tax. So you still pay stamp duty on houses you buy which are not your primary residence. That seems to be the plan, which is fine. It would be a tax that would aim to raise the same amount of money that stamp duty currently does, but shifting the burden higher up the wealth ladder. So people in more expensive properties can probably expect to pay a bit more overall. So people moving from, say, rental to buying their own property, they would pay nothing because the tax is on the sales, not the purchasers. People moving from one owner occupation to another will potentially pay a tax on the sale, depending on where they begin it. But presumably it would have to work out lower than the stamp duty is on those properties right now at the bottom end of the range. That being said, any cost involved in moving across the country for work is, of course, something which reduces the chances of people being willing to do it. So even a more progressive tax on selling a house will have an economic cost. But if it's a way lower cost than the current taxes, then it's a net boost to the economy. But there's also a look at overhauling council tax to get rid of the ridiculous disparity between rates paid and house value. It may even, reading between the lines, be getting rid of council tax altogether and replacing that, folding it all into this property tax maybe. Like, we have this situation. Mansions paying less than semis is a clear nonsense. Everyone agrees council tax has been broken for a long time. It was supposed to be based on the value of the home. It's not. It's not even like it worked out well when it began and it's just gone out of kilter over time. There's a certain extent to that. But it didn't even begin well. It was a knee-jerk reaction to getting bitten on the arse by the originally intended poll tax. People did not like it and they made their feelings known. Except this time, the overhaul won't just aim to make the system fairer, but raise more money for councils, which means winners and losers. The Treasury will have to work out a way to make sure it delivers economic benefits without taking political hits. That being said, as various people have been pointing out with this news, Labour have already shown themselves willing to piss people off to get their investment paid for. According to The Guardian, if the Treasury finds a way to do it, the stamp duty changes could be implemented this Parliament, but the council tax changes would take longer, which I can absolutely accept. And at that point, I would suggest hopefully Reeves will then look at land tax more broadly. I mean, I've said when discussing that subject before, I absolutely get it would take years. You couldn't afford to implement this in haste and mess it up. Imagine like a winter fuel allowance type cock-up because of a rushed policy, but affecting everyone who wants to buy a house. You wouldn't just piss off even more people. You'd kick the economy in the knackers while you're doing it. So you have to take the time to get it right. And of course, you have to take time to ease people into it gently to avoid shocks. You don't want people acting panicked. But if you couldn't implement them quickly, are these really going to solve the urgent problem with the budget this autumn? Well, it might. We have to remember what the problem Reeves has. It's not that she's not raising enough taxes to pay for her spending. I think that's what a lot of people are getting if they read the mainstream media. Oh, she needs to raise more taxes because her spending is too expensive. No, it's not that at all. There's not a problem with the taxes she's raising. It's paying for everything fine. Reeves's problem is that the OBR are calculating that due to the higher cost of borrowing, the UK national debt will not be lower as a share of GDP in 5 years' time than it is now. This, by the way, is an economically bad fiscal policy to have, but it's politically necessary, apparently. But that is literally the problem. It's as silly as that. But that is the problem. Reeves doesn't need to physically raise more money. She just needs the model to spit out a number that says debt will be lower in 5 years' time. So if the model calculates that this change will raise enough to spit that number out, problem solved. She doesn't need this money now, next year, or the year after even. Won't matter how much the tax actually raises, only what the computer says it will raise in the next 5 years. Although that doesn't mean these changes would just be an economic game, they would both be impactful. The stamp duty change would genuinely boost the economy, to get it right, according to pretty much any economist you ask. The council tax changes would raise more money for struggling councils and shift the burden to the wealthier. So the impacts are real. It's just that the real impact won't happen for a while. The short-term benefit Reeves needs is for the computer to stop saying no. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind-the-scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.